What about packing?
Packing. Okay, so hot and humid, you're going to be wearing clothes that, since you're going to be working, you don't mind sweating in. There are plenty of places where you can go and get laundry done, so you don't need to bring a ton of clothes. You can just wash it while you're there, whether you are washing it with shampoo, Rick Steves style, in a sink, or whether you're giving it to the lady on the corner for a couple of dollars. There are lots of options. It's better to underpack. You can always buy more things there. The other thing I'll say is, if you bring extra, if you've got flip-flops and tennis shoes and things like that, whether they get dirty or really used up and you just don't think you're going to use them anymore, if you leave them there, our coordinator will get them to people who will use them. Shoes are a huge thing. Needing shoes, and just basic shorts and t-shirts, any of that stuff that you feel like, hey, you might not wear again, you can leave it there and bring souvenirs home to support the economy that way, because you're just not going to need a lot of clothes, and most people don't dress up. Now, Siem Reap, unlike some of our locations, because it's so full of cafes and restaurants and bars and clubs and tourist sites, if you wanted to dress up, for example, to go and dance in the evening, you can do that, but people aren't dressing in cocktail dresses. So you really don't need to bring anything dressy. I think it's always a good idea to have at least one pair of closed-toed shoes, so that if, for example, we're building something with concrete blocks, you've got something covering your toes. And if you can bring work gloves with you, it's helpful. Although we often have a few pair you can use, they get crusty and wet and dry, and some people just don't, they can feel gross to put on. So it's better to bring your own if you're picky about that. And flip-flops are also good, particularly for off-work hours. And having power banks for your phones, having an umbrella just as much for the rain as for the sun. A little day pack to put all your stuff in. A money belt to keep your passport and money on you. I don't always follow this rule, but I do believe that it's the wisest thing to do. There are often safes in the mid-range hotels where our volunteers are housed, but sometimes there'll be a couple rooms without them. And it's just better to always have it on you.
Yeah. On the orientation guide, there's the essential items are bug repellent with at least 20% DEET, sunscreen, flashlight, water bottle, and umbrella.
Yes. Yeah. And in terms of bugs, I mean, I feel like the mosquito situation in Texas is much worse than I've ever seen in Cambodia. But for people who aren't used to seeing Texas-style mosquitoes, I do think it is a good idea to have bug repellent. And also, when it comes to packing, on a somewhat related note, money. I will say the same thing here that I say for pretty much all of our programs, with the exception of Cuba. I would bring 2 credit cards. I would call those credit card companies and give them a travel alert so that they don't think it's fraud the first time you go to use it. And sometimes even then, even if you've given them a travel alert, they'll think it's fraud. I would bring a debit card, and same thing, notify your bank you're going to be out. And I would bring around $200 US as a backup. When you arrive in country, I would use your debit card in the ATM at the airport. If you don't use it there, you can use it in town, but always use it in a really well-lit, high-traffic area, not in a corner, because if you go in kind of down an alley where not many people are walking, those often people will put false fronts onto those ATMs, and we've had this happen where people have had their bank accounts emptied that way. So I would just use a highly trafficked one in an airport. That's why an airport one is safe. And then pull out, which is more or less the maximum amount of local currency you can. So I would look up whatever the current rate is, and it's usually around $200 or $250 of the local currency is the maximum you can pull out. Sometimes it's as low as $100. And yes, there will be a $2 or $3 fee, but still the exchange rate that the bank is going to give you on the ATM card is much better than you would get at any exchange bureau. So those US dollars, you're not bringing those as your primary spending money. It's a backup. Let's say all the ATMs are closed and whatever. But if you don't use that $200, you still have it when you come home. So I see no loss in having that $200, pulling out the maximum, having 1 debit and 2 credit. Also have a photocopy of your passport with you, and then email yourself one just in case you lose your passport or get it stolen. The best thing you can have to help you get your new one is going to be a photocopy of your old one. And they're not going to give it to you immediately. You're going to have to wait and go to the consulate or embassy and wait at least 24 hours after you show up with your photocopy to get the new one. But it's a good practice. So anyway, those are just things to pack and prepare. Also, fans. I've been bringing either those cooling towels that you wet and they stay cold for a while, or these little plastic motorized, you put batteries in them, they're rechargeable. Neck fans have gotten really popular in the last couple of years, and they are helpful because it does get humid and hot.